All right, so apparently we're live now. And
Great.
I'm just gonna view this on Facebook real quick and mute that. And I'll share that link with you as well. That we have an idea of how many people are watching us, and commenting on it, if any.
Through Facebook, right?
All right, so that's the thing, and here you go. I've shared that link with you as well. You can share it on your.
Cool. Perfect.
All right. Okay, so I got this idea of talking to people that I know have been environmentally conscious or have been doing something for the environment for the last several years, or maybe people who've just gotten interested in the environment as well over the course of the last year, 2 months, 3 months, or whatever. We spoke with Tawfiq Pasha yesterday, and with Abid Umar as well. Tawfiq Pasha, as everybody knows, has been working for the environment in Pakistan for the last 4 decades, and Abid Umar has been working with Paki. So I decided, of course, to get Mashal here as well, who has interned with Garbage Can for about 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah, 3
Separate.
months. Yeah, from December.
Yeah, and it kind of like the internship bit, I guess, ended during the Corona fiasco, and while I was in the US and everything as well, was also like. So Mashal, why don't you introduce yourself? I don't think I'll do that good of a job. I mean, like I've written a quick description. You're like interested in sustainable fashion. You work with creative branding and stuff. So why don't you introduce yourself and why you're interested in the environment, and then we'll go forward.
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Mashal. I am from Hong Kong. I graduated in fashion marketing and management, and throughout my degree I became passionate about sustainability, specifically within fashion. Since then I've worked with several luxury brands in secondhand luxury fashion, as well as multi-brand stores like DFS Group, for which I did a lot of communication, content marketing work. And then I decided to come to Karachi for 6 months to pursue new opportunities, and that's how I came across Ahmed and Garbage Can. And sorry, my mom just dropped a massive pan. Anyways,
that's it.
And
the pleasures of working from home, right? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly. House is so cool. So I worked with Garbage Can for 3 months as a sustainability outlook assistant. And then after that, I went on to working for a sustainable fashion brand, Neshayman Studio. So I'm currently working with them. And that's also coming to an end this week, actually. So 3 months for that as well. Yeah, so it's been exciting being here, giving me a completely different outlook on the environmental issues here, and insights into the fashion sustainability space as well.
Yeah. So first question, how long has your stay been extended for now? Now, I mean, you were supposed to be here for about 6 months, but
yeah, it looks like another month is, to kahin nahi gaya. Like, probably I was still planning to leave right after Eid.
Okay.
Inshallah, let's see if that works out. But
yeah, fingers crossed. Hopefully things get better.
Yeah, exactly. But then again, like if things do get better, then there are still a couple things that I need to finish up before I just leave. So
yeah,
no idea at the moment. Hopefully be back in Hong Kong, during the summer. Yeah.
Great. All right. So our main topics, just like yesterday, are the 2 topics. One, since the climate march in September 2019, which was basically that climate strike was held across the world. So even though you weren't here in Pakistan, but you probably saw what was going on like across the world, like across the globe as well. Since then, what changes you've seen in the conversation as far as the environment is concerned, globally, even locally, on a citizens level, or on the level of governments and international partnerships and everything as well. That's one topic. And the second one is since the corona pandemic hit, and the lockdown and everything happened, what changes have you seen in the environment, in the atmosphere, like around us? Of course, considering that everybody's in lockdown and there's reports that animals are coming out and like the pollution levels have gone down and so on. And because your main focus is on sustainable fashion, so I would appreciate it if you spoke or if you brought that insight as well as to how the textile industry or the sustainable fashion industry has been coping since the pandemic hit, and in the last year or so as well. Because you, of course, interviewed Deepak Parvani recently as well, and Ari Bazar as well, and a couple others, and with Nashiman, like I mean, I'm sure with several designers. So yeah, so. If you wanted to comment on sustainable fashion in Pakistan, and then tackle those two.
Okay, sure. So, should we start with the first question about Climate March?
Yeah, Climate March.
Yeah, I think I can comment from the Hong Kong perspective. So, yeah, internationally within Asia, Hong Kong, since the Climate March, I've seen a lot more environmental awareness within citizens and within businesses as well. However, I wouldn't say that the progress has been that huge as to, like, obviously there are still a lot of problems, and waste management remains to be one of them, because, all of these countries, Hong Kong and Southeast Asian countries, used to send their waste to China. And after they stopped accepting that, countries had to start, dealing with their own waste in the best way. And Hong Kong is a really, really small city, for those of you that don't know. And so we've been running out of space for landfills for a couple of years now. Food waste actually makes up like 30% of the solid waste that's generated in Hong Kong. However, there has been a lot of progress in terms of, for example, the F&B industry. A lot of restaurant groups have, completely banned plastic straws and, switched to other alternatives.
The what industry? Like, I'm sorry.
F&B, sorry, the food and beverage industry.
Oh, food and beverage industry. Okay.
My bad. Yeah, so a lot of restaurant groups have, ditched single-use plastic in their straws and their takeaways, bags, etc. There have been consumer shifts around, using tote bags at supermarkets and when shopping. So the sentiment is definitely there. I think it just needs to be, expanded to a whole new level. So we're still there in progress of that.
Right.
But internationally speaking, like, there's definitely been, compared to the last 2 years, there's been so much more talk about climate change and in the environmental issues. And I think Greta, obviously, as we all know, is a huge role to play in that, in enabling that conversation. So yeah, let's see where it goes. I think 2020 wasn't off to a great start with the wildfires and everything, but that just shows how much work there's still to be done.
But it's interesting, even though 2020 wasn't off to a great start, but right now, as like environmentally speaking, I mean, it's amazing at this point in time. I mean, it's not good for us, of course. Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Yeah, exactly.
Like, I also wanted to comment, like, you mentioned that China stopped taking in recyclable items and waste from across the world. Turns out, like, I thought, like, initially I thought that it was a trade war and everything, but then when I during my visit to the US, I spoke with various landfills, and I spoke with various importers and exporters of recyclable items and everything as well. And they mentioned the reason China stopped taking recyclable items was because there was a lot of extra waste that came with it. So they would say 10% or at least 15% of contaminated items. So 15% of items that were not recyclable, such as food waste and other waste that was coming with it. So they've changed the laws to saying that we'll only take recyclable items that have 1% contamination.
Mm.
So,
And
which
that
is of
is
course
like, yeah, difficult to achieve.
exactly. So it's difficult to achieve, but like I guess it's upping the standards, which is
Hmm.
overall in the long run good. I believe.
Yeah, for
Anyway,
sure.
so that's your in like take on international global conversations. So have you
Yeah.
seen any like conversations locally in Pakistan? I guess you've been hanging out with environmental people, but still, I mean, that's your
Yeah.
main circle. But still, I mean, your dad's pretty big on that as well, with coffee vagara. But like,
Yeah.
how about
Um,
yeah?
so I don't know how much of an insight I can offer here, but in the time that I've been here, like you said, I've mainly been hanging out with the environmentalists group of people, and that honestly, when I came here, I was so surprised to see the amount of action that was happening here in
Mm-hmm.
the in the sustainability space. I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, I had no idea that Karachi could be doing so much,
Mm-hmm.
and that there are actually that many people that care and that are working towards it. Because,
Right.
in my opinion, I'll be honest, it was, it's a developing country, and I always just saw how many problems there are.
Mm-hmm.
And coming here, I realized how many solutions have, come out of all of
Yeah.
those issues. So I was really, really impressed. And I think in the, like you mentioned, Coffee O'Gara, and my dad was definitely, a key person to kind of enable that, to start the conversation in a way, in the restaurant and the cafes group.
Yeah.
But then before that, even of course, like we know EcoPack and how they've been
Mm-hmm.
working towards, working with restaurants and like ditching single-use plastic and providing eco-friendly alternatives and all of that. Um, and then urban forest and what they've been trying to do
Yeah.
with that project on the Clifton side. So there's a lot happening. I think that I can't compare it to before, because before I would come here for uh, anywhere between a week to 10 days,
Mm-hmm.
and I would never ever come across any of these environmentally or sustainably
Mm-hmm.
related things. And I was always thinking to myself that, wow, there's so much that needs to be done here.
Right.
And coming here, I realized that there is a lot happening.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
But do you think all of that is happening in small islands? Because I guess for Coffee Vagara, you have to go across the city, right? Like, you have to go to
yeah,
North Nazimabad as well, to Gulshan
yeah, yeah,
Muscat,
yeah.
Sharafabad, and everything. So, do you think most of this conversation is happening in the Clifton Defense area, or do you think there's a larger change or larger awareness that you might have noticed across the city?
I definitely feel like it's happening in parts of the city, like Clifton for sure. And I think that's obviously to do with the people that live there. They, probably have higher purchasing powers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they have more of an awareness from that aspect. Like if we talk about the local Pakistani public,
Mm-hmm.
they are still, I don't think they're aware of how serious
Yeah.
the issues are. And but it's ironic because it's their communities that are being affected the most. For example, in
Mm-hmm.
North Nazavad, Coffee Ogara has their act going on, but then if you step outside the shop on the
Yeah.
street, in that area, you'll see it's littered with trash.
Yeah.
And so even though if you're trying to speak to those people in certain areas, it's still
Yeah.
very difficult to like reach the larger audience, like in
Mm-hmm.
Karachi as a whole, because it's such a big city and there are so many areas that aren't
Right.
given enough attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for fashion and everything, well, I mean, we didn't go to RLCC for fashion, but we did go to RLCC, and you noticed like that they've been training
Yeah.
ladies over there, and they're working with leftover cloth from designers such as Deepak Ramani and Koil and everything. So,
Yeah.
do you think that's gonna have a larger impact as well? And yeah, that's a question. There you
I it's amazing the work that RLCC is doing, and a lot of other smaller businesses like Project Kamyabi, for example, that we also came across. There's a lot of work happening with upcycling textile waste, but I think that again, it's not a solution that can be scaled in the sense that it would completely eliminate textile waste, for example, because
Of
if you
course.
actually go into the markets in Karachi and in Gulf and these areas where you'll find tailors, because a lot of people now they're used to designing their own clothes, so they purchase all the fabric themselves, go to
Yeah.
tailors, get it designed and custom made. So if you go to all these tailors in their workshops, you'll see that they actually have so much leftover fabric and like
Yeah.
scraps. And I was at, I forgot the name of the market around Gold Plaza, Dr. Plaza, yes, in around
Oh,
Ashkelon, I think. So I was speaking to, yeah, so I was speaking to a shop owner there who had his own. He had his like furniture, soft furnishing store, and I asked him like, "What do you do with all this textile waste?" And he said, we just chuck it out. And I was like, "Okay, where does that go?" And he said it goes into the Nehre Khayyam gutter area.
oh, geez. Okay,
Oh,
really?
there. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I was pretty surprised because I was like, I mean, there's huge amounts of textile waste that they have at the end of a day. Like, for example, over the summer, they get so many orders because it's their busiest time.
Yeah.
And all the fabric scraps, they accumulate and they eventually end up in landfills.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, this solution definitely needs to be scaled up to the sense that, if there was just like Garbage Can does waste management, if there was a company that, collected all this textile waste from all these craftsmen and artisans across the city and, managed that properly and then distributed it to organizations like RLCC and brands like Deepak Karwani, I think that would be very effective. Uh, like these are things that are happening internationally abroad in the US. There are a lot of organizations that are dealing with textile waste and
Okay.
then distributing it. So I can definitely see that happening here in the long term.
That is not a bad idea. Maybe that's something that we could work on. Um, yeah. So what happens? I mean, it ends up in the landfills, sure, but do they do they disintegrate
Right.
naturally or?
So 60% of our clothes and our fabrics are made of polyester. Polyester is the most commonly used textile alongside cotton, but even that is not organic cotton, it's synthetic cotton. But going back to polyester, polyester is a synthetic source that derives from petroleum. So it's essentially plastic. So our clothes are literally made of plastic. So when they end up in landfills, they don't biodegrade, they don't disintegrate, they just sit there for years and years and years because it can take up to like 100 plus years for a polyester piece of fabric to actually biodegrade. And so that's the most important thing, and that's what sustainable fashion is all about, is how can we make clothes that aren't environmentally damaging, and taking in the social aspect as well. The workers that make these clothes
Right.
have they suffer a lot below
Yeah.
minimum wages and whatnot. So that's
Yeah.
the whole issue.
Okay. So you mentioned that summer is when there's the highest demand for at least locally, and you probably know the trends and the demands and everything globally as well. But has sorry, excuse me. Has the demand for new clothes or designer wear or I guess fashionable items in general, has it gone down since the pandemic hit, or is it still at the same level? And the changes in trends, how do they affect the environment right now?
So the fashion industry has been, hit extremely hard with the pandemic.
Right.
It's a $2.5 trillion industry. And of course, like a lot of brands are suffering. It's expected that around 80% of brands are going to be like bankrupt by the end of the year if the situation doesn't improve.
Mm-hmm.
And there's definitely been a decrease in consumption, though,
Mm-hmm.
which is why they're suffering, because people aren't shopping fast fashion
Yeah.
specifically, and they're not shopping at all. But there,
Right.
in terms of trends, there has been a huge rise in athleisure, which is basically comfortable activewear. So your
Right.
sweatpants.
Yeah.
So there's been an increase in that. People have been really, buying new sweatpants and things to wear at home to stay comfy and cozy. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the biggest trends. And because people are at home more, they're trying to work out, and
Yeah.
with all these Instagram live yoga sessions and whatnot,
Yeah.
that's a trend that's being reflected in the fashion industry. But because consumption, in the beginning, production in China came to a halt. So that, of course, had a positive impact on the environment because
Mm-hmm.
factories weren't producing for a certain period of time. Um, fabric dyeing accounts for a lot of water pollution. And
Mm-hmm.
so with that stopping for a while, I think it gave everyone the break that it needed. But
Right.
it had, more of a social impact rather than environmental in terms of a negative, you know, aspect. So I can go into that as well if you need me to. But
Yeah. We'll talk about that real quick. But like, as far as speaking of trends,
mhm,
um, the increase in demand for homeware or comfortable wear, I guess,
mhm.
um, would that offset the decrease in demand for fast fashion? I feel like that they might have been like just off the top of my head, you might be able to give me, better statistics and everything. If not now, maybe you could share it, share those stats later. Um, the because people aren't going out as much, and half the time we do fashion basically is to show other people that okay, fine, and like
Yeah.
then there's more wear and tear when you're going out to work, when you're going out
Mhm.
like outdoors as well. But
Yeah.
while you're at home, you just purchase once and hopefully use that like across 2 or 3 months or 6 months or a year or a couple of years. So in the longer run, the offset I feel like might be that there's probably lesser demand overall.
Um, it's a good point that you've raised. But I don't think, like, if we look at the impact that fast fashion has had over the last decade, I
Mhm.
don't think that this setback in demand right now is going to offset all of that.
Right.
Even though people are shopping less,
Mhm.
they're still shopping, and people are used to buying things that they don't need. So even when it
Right.
comes to homeware, you know you'll see like people, I'm pretty sure as soon as the markets open up and everything, the first thing there will probably maybe not the first thing, but like the demand is gonna be there again because people have been, those that have been working at home a lot, they have been earning, so they have that income, and they don't have anywhere to spend it right now. Like they
Mhm.
haven't been spending that much for the last few months. So
Right.
as soon as lockdowns end, they will have that ability to spend to that level again.
Right. Of
I
course.
don't think it'll be to that level that it used to be at before,
Hmm.
because this whole pandemic, if there's anything that it's made people realize, is that you don't need to consume as much, because
Exactly.
it's interesting how the economy is literally on the verge of collapse because we're only buying the things we need.
Yeah.
And so already everyone's subconsciously ditched fast fashion during this time period without even realizing it.
Yeah.
So hopefully they realize that, yeah, they don't need to shop every week, and they don't need to constantly buy into new trends.
Right.
Because in US and UK, for sure, when they buy new items, it's very regular, and they don't
Exactly.
really think about like the life cycle of the garment after they're done with it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's there's still a huge demand for shopping new items, like even secondhand pre-loved fashion is only within the luxury segment. um, so the majority that is shopping, fast fashion, they really need to be more conscious and like think about
Right.
what's happening to it
Yeah.
afterwards. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll talk about the social aspect of it after just this one quick
Sure, sure.
discussion about behavior. You just touched on how there's been a realization that people don't need to consume as much. So, I mean, there's been talks of opening up the cities and the economy and everything in the next couple of days, in the next month or so. But
Yeah.
quite realistically, this won't happen, and I hope that it doesn't happen, because the corona pandemic, I mean, it is terrible. The second
Yeah.
you open things up, it is going to spread as quickly as possible as well. I mean, it's
For sure.
spreading like wildfire while everything is shut down. So,
Yeah, completely agree.
over the course of the lockdown, I guess, do you think that there'll be enough of a behavior change that the realization that we don't need to consume as much will actually stick? And you did mention that as soon as the lockdown opens up, a lot of people are going to go back. And I mean, of course, like, I mean, as soon as the second the lockdown opens up, one of my one of my resolutions is that I'm gonna try and go to the movies a lot more and not just watch them at home. Go to
Right. Fair enough.
so yeah, exactly. So do you think that there will be behavior change, or do you think that people are just gonna forget about everything and then go, like, if the lockdown continues for an extended period of time, say till next May, if there's not the coming May 2021?
I think that the behavioral change is it will stick for a while. I think the pandemic isn't something that people will just easily forget. They'll still remember this time period of social distancing and the lockdowns and everything. And in terms of like the trends, reports that I've been reading, the consumers right now, they have a really strong discount mindset. So for example, 56% of customers said that special promotions would be an important factor when shopping for clothes after the whole lockdown, like throughout 2020. So there's still, price is still like one of the most important factors for them. And I think that brands are going to respond to that with huge amounts of sale and with discounts and promotions. And I think that people will, fall into
Succumb to
that.
it.
Yeah, I don't think that I mean, it really depends, in markets like the UK, where recently, I mean, like a couple days ago, this huge brand Boohoo, they released a mask for like quarantine queens.
Yeah.
And that came under so much backlash because it was like £9 or something. And
Oh wow.
it's just like tone deaf, things like that. And then people actually, buy into it, and just because they think it's like trendy and cool.
Yeah. Oh no, like I was having a conversation with a friend, and I mentioned it to her because I mean, it was a sort of a feminist type of conversation about, like fashion and everything. But then I was like, you know what, the veil is gonna make a comeback because of the pandemic thing, because a lot of people are gonna, and not because of any moral or religious or any reason, but they're just gonna start marketing masks and veils in a way which will be very tone deaf as far as the pandemic is concerned.
Exactly.
But it is gonna make a comeback because of that.
Exactly. So yeah, like I think it depends on the market. Like in Karachi, for example, I don't see people necessarily going out and, you know, shopping, spending a lot of their money on clothing. Because here I think people would more likely spend on like entertainment and food and drinks and like just being out in general. While if you look at like Hong Kong, for example, I think it would be a balance of both. But to answer your question, I don't think that the behavioral change is going to be, maybe I'm just not optimistic enough, but I don't think it's going to be as strong that, you know, people just realize they don't need to consume and they don't. Because like from what I'm seeing and from how levels of consumption have been in the fashion industry, it's not expected to, you know, like completely decline anytime soon, especially with the whole discount culture. You know, brands are just going to find new ways to lure customers in.
I guess I'm optimistic, and I'm hoping that there will be a change.
I hope so too. Yeah.
Anyway, so sorry.
At least for like throughout this year, and then maybe like next year it might not like last that long. But yeah.
Okay, so let's touch upon that social aspect as well. Of course, like as we know, there are a lot of clothes and fashion and everything. I mean, and designer wear and everything is usually made in sweatshops or in like factories that have not like don't have very hygienic conditions or very safe conditions. Even in like for example, Khadi recently came under fire for that, and globally there's been several brands who come under fire, and a lot of brands, as you've mentioned, they like you informed me like a couple months ago that they used to just throw away their items that were returned or that were not used. The excess stock. But have they started donating to like to people who might not be, you know, as privileged as others? So just like a double comment or like a dual comment on the social aspect, the excess thing and the factories.
Right. So I'm gonna link it to COVID because it's very relevant right now. It's great that we're having this conversation actually, because it's actually Fashion Revolution Week. So
really? Oh, great! I didn't know that, but perfect.
So just to quickly, you know, touch upon.
Actually, I did know it, and that's exactly why I had this conversation. You know what? Yeah,
I'm sure you did. Brilliant. So 7 years ago today, 24th April actually marked one of the world's most tragic industrial disasters. So the Rana Plaza collapsed in Bangladesh. So this factory produced clothes for major fast fashion brands, and it collapsed and killed about 1,000 garment workers. So since then, really, there's been an emphasis on the true cost of fashion, which is really below minimum wages, unsafe working conditions, gender discrimination, just endless list of things. So this is where Fashion Revolution Week started, and everyone is encouraged to ask brands who made my clothes. So that's like I mean, if you search up who made my clothes, you come up with 1,000 results. So this is like prime time. This is when everyone really starts questioning brands and their social responsibility aspect. So it's you know, to see that happened several years ago, and then obviously it wasn't what the reason why the situation right now is not something that happened because of brands. The pandemic is not something that's controlled by anyone, but you know, you would think that the 7 years would have given brands enough time to like learn their lessons and be more responsible. But since the pandemic outbreak, millions of garment workers have been affected. The fashion industry employs around 5 million garment workers. So millions of them are left with no jobs, no income. They're on the verge of poverty just because fashion brands, you know, they basically, what happens is they pay for their orders way months in advance before the clothes are produced. And so factories actually pay for the for the materials and the fabrics upfront first. And so what happened now is that they're refusing to pay for those
Right.
orders because they canceled them and they're just not paying upfront for it. So factories are just left with this like all this merchandise and it has nowhere to go, nowhere to sell. And so then they can't pay wages to their workers.
Can
So
this merchandise be used later on? Can they store this and then use sell it out next year or something, or is that not
it's
gonna?
it's because the clothes that were produced were for this season, spring, summer.
Oh my goodness! So it's
And
all of that is
so
gonna go to
it's
waste.
like all, just a vicious cycle. I mean, obviously you're thinking like, what the hell? But that's
Yeah.
what fashion is. It's, I mean, I would hope that they don't incinerate that merchandise
Hmm.
as brands usually do. But actually, since the conversation began with Fashion Revolution, which is the NGO that plays a huge role in all of this, they actually started, reaching out to brands, and people there's been a lot of backfire on it. So now there's a lot of brands that have taken responsibility and they've like started paying for their orders and all of that. But then there's still a bunch of brands that haven't. For example, H&M has. So that's great. Um, so I don't think that they would. I mean, it can definitely be reused for next year's spring summer cycle, but then again, like all that inventory sitting in factories is like an extra cost.
Right.
So it depends if brands are willing to pay for that. If they take responsibility for it, then great. They deal with the costs of either burning it or either storing it somewhere.
Hmm.
But if they don't, then yeah, all of that just really goes to waste. Um, so yeah, in terms of environmental impact, like yesterday, the British Fashion Council announced that instead of London Fashion Week taking place physically, it's going to be happening digitally, which is great
Hmm.
because fashion weeks are very destructive to the environment. The amount of resources that are used to, build the runway theatrics, and then hundreds of people
Right.
fly out to see the shows and all of that. It's very wasteful. So the fact that it's happening digitally, I think, is going to set a new trend um, because a lot of brands were already thinking about new ways to, make their runway shows more sustainable.
Hmm.
So I think this will give them the push that it needs. Like if digital fashion weeks are successful, then there's no reason why they would continue with physical ones. Um, and then to answer your question about the excess stock,
Hmm.
um, sorry, could you just reiterate what the main point was? You asked whether there
The
are any companies that are dealing with this excess
Yeah,
waste.
like
Like,
the just the social aspect of it. Like then there are a lot of people that are, of course, out of work, for example,
right,
and
right.
like already the affordability was quite low for several different brands, and now like that the economic downturn has, of course, made it a lot more difficult. Even though there, like for several countries, there are much needed handouts, but at the same time, I mean, they cannot afford it. So all the stock, what's the technical term for it? That's leftover
Endless
or
stock, leftover dead stock.
dead stock. They go, or, and like and the stuff returned. Is it just wasted, or are these companies starting to give it away or sell it at
Oh,
a lower
I'll
price,
tell
something
you,
like
they
that?
would never donate it. They would
Yeah.
never donate it to, the poor economies because that would hurt their brand image. So that's why a lot of brands choose to burn it and incinerate it because they don't want it reaching these third party markets and these developing countries because that would hurt their brand image. Um, so yeah, that's the hard, sad truth, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think that they're going to, if they do keep it, they're going to discount the heck out of it, and there's just going to be a lot of markdowns. and that as well as it's gonna lure people in, but obviously it's not good for the companies at the end of the day. So yeah. But in Hong Kong, for example, like there's an NGO called Redress. So they don't work with factories directly, but a lot of brands give their excess merchandise to them, and a lot of consumers as well. So they are one of the key players. Actually, they're very well known internationally as well. So I think there need to be more NGOs like Redress, that are dealing with all this textile waste and excess inventory.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so internationally and locally, do you have would you have any idea or any rough numbers as to what the cost of this lockdown has been for the textile or fashion industry? For example, I know that Tariq Road is completely closed. I mean, that's all I know. Like I move over, I was like, oh, okay, like the all the shops and stuff. And considering that all these stores are closed, of course, there's an environmental aspect to it as well. Like because our malls and shops and everything, especially the clothes stores, are for some reason very well lit or almost overlit. There's like, I mean, one or two lights can do the job, but there are at least 15 or 20 or 30 like
all the lights.
Exactly, really like high wattage bulbs or and all sorts of stuff. So I, for one, am glad that all of those lights have gone away. So hopefully, like they're using a lot less energy and so on.
Yeah.
But do you know what the economic cost? Maybe Abid Umar, my like he's commenting on the page and everything as well. He might be, he was like, he says, thanks for doing this, Ahmed and Mashal. So hey.
Thank you for listening.
So maybe he might be able to shed some light on that as well. So, but would you have any idea?
Yeah, so I don't have the exact number, but I do know that the piece of information that I have is that the global fashion industry will contract by 30% in 2020 year on year.
Wow.
So that's basically like a huge decrease in growth. Because it's been growing crazily the last few years, and now seeing that decline of 30% is huge. And then it's estimated that the industry could regain positive growth of 2 to 4% in 2021. So we see that the effects are gonna last for a while. And I'm sure I'm sure I could get the number as well. So I'll look for that and then get back to you.
And just share those links and sources and everything on the comment section.
Yeah, online. Sorry, just another piece. Like online sales have declined 20% across Europe, and 40% in the US, and 25% in China.
Wow.
And knowing that like Chinese consumers are the biggest group of shoppers for all businesses and like fashion brands specifically, that is very problematic.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, how about sustainable fashion? Because like I believe Nashiman and like Wakar's efforts were the first sustainable fashion thing in Pakistan.
Yeah, he's one of the first few ethical fashion labels in Karachi. Honestly, the brand itself started up in October last year. So when I started working with him in February, I really worked on like increasing brand awareness and getting the word out there. And then all of this happened. So, but Nashiman was going to showcase at Pakistan Fashion Week.
Right.
And or Hum Showcase. So that would have been huge because, putting an ethical, sustainable fashion label out there on the market, in the scene, is great. And with fashion Week being postponed and everything, it's a bit unfortunate. But
has it been postponed indefinitely, or like is it going to be happening
We're still
sometime?
waiting to hear back from the Pakistan Fashion Week Council
Okay.
on dates and announcements. So I was supposed to attend, and now I don't even know like if I'll be here for it. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I think we're just trying to ride the wave, and a lot of brands right now are just trying to engage with their customers as much as possible. Not necessarily selling right now, but just overall engagement we see on like Facebook Live and Instagram Live and all of these activities going on. So we've been trying to do some of that, and once this is all over, then we'll be back to well, he'll be back on track to
Right. Inshallah.
inshallah.
Great. Great. Um, well, this was a fun
Wow,
conversation. Yeah.
super fun. Yeah, 45 minutes.
Exactly. Like it didn't feel like 45 minutes. I was like, oh wait, hold
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to me for that long.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not like there are one or two comments. I did mention that people can ask questions. So hopefully, if they have any questions and stuff, they'll probably ask in the
Sure.
next minute or two.
Okay.
But yeah, like I would appreciate it if you could link some sources and everything on into the comment section over there, so that people can go and learn more about
Yeah, for
such.
sure. There's a whole report on the state of fashion 2020, which is
Yeah.
released every year, and they released a coronavirus update on it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that has been a key source of information. So I'll share that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Perfect. Great.
great.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so
And
much, Ahmed.
yeah, and hopefully everything goes well, and hopefully coffee wagera is up and running as well, because yeah, we
Inshallah,
do with good
for
coffee
sure.
as well.
And same with you. Good luck with everything. I'm so honestly, can I just say, like, I'm so happy for you and like everything you're doing. I'm so proud of like the way you've really made this whole thing into an opportunity for yourself with the disinfection services and the ration bags that you've been distributing. It's
Yeah.
amazing what you're doing. So
Yeah.
good
Thank you.
stuff.
Just like trying to cope with everything and just trying to
Yeah,
do our part. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. All
Perfect.
right. See
Thank
you
you so
soon,
much.
inshallah. Take care.
Of
Bye.
course. Bye.